silence, but I wanted to take advantage of sitting up here to take a minute and tell you something about my reflections about today. We talk about 9/11 because it was such an impact on all of our lives, and we talk about the individuals who, in our mind and our eyes, we saw them running toward danger in order to help other people. But I had another reflection that I wanted to share with you, and that was in the aftermath of what was a mind-boggling image of the few days afterwards, and the total silence in the neighborhood. I remember sitting in my backyard. There were no airplanes, no traffic. It seems like people were pretty much staying at home, and no noise other than maybe some birds and some crickets. And then I heard children's voices from a few houses away, and some children's music playing, and somebody singing happy birthday. And it was the children being given a moment of normalcy in the midst of this very traumatic period in our lives. Those children have already gone through a public school system, and they are young adults now, 18 years later. This is probably the year when we'll have the last children who were born before 9/11 of 01 going through our school system. So what we are doing, whether we realize it or not, is we're raising adults. We're not raising children. You know, that may be what's done at home, but in combination, what's going on at home and going on with school, we're raising adults. We're raising the adults who are going to be able to step out into their communities and do good for themselves and their families and other people. And I don't want us to lose sight of what an important role all of us play, whether it's the people at this table who were elected and who swore to uphold the Constitution and to make our best efforts on behalf of the students and the taxpayers, whether it's any of the other school employees are here, or the parents. Because as a team, this is what we're going to do, and we're looking forward to the next few years while we all serve here. So I thank you for letting me give you a little perspective and maybe about what drives me to do this. Okay. We're now you're gonna be.
I'm sorry, are we all gonna share thoughts on?
Would
on that?
anybody else up here like to share?
I thought that's what you said before, but I would actually, I don't know if anybody else does.
I would as well.
So, do you want to, should I just go, or do you want to go in an order, or should I
Yeah,
just
go
go?
ahead.
Okay, so, it was, I appreciate you doing that. I'll be honest with you, I don't normally make comments about 9/11. It's usually the day I take a break from talking politics or what's going on, excuse me, in the world, but something struck me. There's two things that really struck a chord with me this week. First was the legislation in the state requiring schools to spend some time reflecting and discussing 9/11. I believe it's have a moment of silence in school for it. To that note, I know that when we put this schedule together, I certainly didn't realize that we had a meeting on 9/11. So part and parcel with my story is my request that we put in a policy that we no longer do district business on 9/11 and we move our meeting to a different week. We don't have to worry about it for 7 more years, but I would hope as time goes on and I don't want to say it gets less important, but less people who lived through that day and had difficult events during that day. I think it's something we should do as a district. Aside from that, recounting my own memories from that day, I forgot. My wife is an elementary school teacher. At the time, she was a third grade teacher. And I guess it all brought me back too, because this past June was the first year that the students who I believe were born during 9/11 graduated high school. But my wife was a third grade teacher at the time. And I remembered that day very, very clearly because teachers were so helpless that day because they couldn't sit in front of a TV like most of us did. So my wife, every time she got a break, would call like, what's going on? She didn't see the images on TV. She knew something was happening, and she had to care for kids whose parents might have been in the city, were firemen, were cops. And I thought what a difficult day it was for teachers, on top of everybody else. And then the other day, my wife's cousin is a cop, still is a detective in the city. And I guess in the subsequent days of that, my wife had her class write her cousin a note of support. Thank you for your service. We hope you're okay. We're sorry for your loss, all those different things. Well, my wife's cousin's wife posted a picture on Facebook the other day of all the letters spread out on their table. They took them out and they read them. And I thought, what a nice thing. And sometimes we forget. We always honor our first responders and things like that. We always post things on social media. We always say thank you. I know we have a retired officer in the back that works for us, Marcelo Galino. I'm sure he has his own thoughts of that day. He's probably mad because I called him out, but thank you for what you did that day. It struck me, I never really thought about how the first responders remembered that day outside of living it, what the thanks and things like that. So that really struck a chord with me this week. So I wanted to share it because it had such a connection to education and on this day. So thank you for bringing it up and giving us the opportunity to do that.
Anybody else?
Every September 11th, we all know where we were when we found out about it, and my connection to September 11th happens to be South Country Schools, because I was in first grade, and I remember, it's pretty much exactly what Trustee Piccini said. The power and professionalism of my teacher, Miss Mattern, from Brookhaven Elementary School, assuring us that everything was going to be okay. We all knew something was up, and I remember my mother picking me up, and I was unsure why, but at the end of the day, most of the kids were picked up. And every September 11th, I reflect on how thankful I was to be in that classroom setting with my classmates and a very well-poised teacher to remind us that we were safe. And I think we just really need to thank our teachers for being there for our students every day, but today especially.
Ms. Aruda?
I'll just be quick. Much like Jack, I was in the first grade too. No, I'm just kidding. Actually, for 9/11, it was my first year teaching. It was the first week of school, my very first year teaching. And I remember, much like you said, Mr. Piccini, being there knowing that something had happened. Not knowing that something had happened, but knowing I felt the need to protect the faces in front of me. And the heartbreak that happened that day and the children leaving, and then them coming back in the next day, and that safety and having those discussions, it resonates how powerful a teacher is within the classroom and how learning does not always happen in a book. Those children, much like you said, coming out of the letters, they knew that they were safe. They know, and now 18 years later, we still have these conversations. Each year I bring my students to the memorial pools. It's powerful. And I'll never forget that moment, and most importantly, I'll never forget September 12th and where we were on September 12th as a community and as a world. I'm hoping to see more of September 12th in our worlds.
Thank you. So now back to the
Business.
business. Emergency exits. If there's a reason to leave, do it orderly and go out one of the exit doors. We have a smoke-free campus, which means the campus itself and all buildings, no smoking anywhere at any time. Now, we're going to go to board consent agendas.
Yes.
I need a motion to accept the provisions in C 1 through 5. Is there a motion, Mr. Trent? Mr. Nix is second. All in favor? It's unanimous. The consent is granted. Next, we have communication and announcements, starting with the superintendent's report.
Yes, thank you, President Hayes. Minus a handful of issues with transportation this school year, our building principals reported and described opening day as absolutely delightful. Things ran very smooth, and we're off to a very successful start of our new school year. Bus service went well on opening days for the most part. Each of our schools did experience some hiccups and delays, which certainly can be expected on the first few days of school, particularly with the new transportation provider, as we have experienced this school year. Most of our issues were at South Haven Early Childhood Center, but it appears all those issues have been resolved. We do still have a few buses that are running late, and we are constantly working on resolving those latenesses. On Tuesday, September 3rd, we had our grand opening and ribbon cutting ceremony for South Haven Early Childhood Center. This ceremony was well attended. I was joined by President Hayes, Vice President Nix, Trustees DeSanto, and Trustee Trent for the ceremony. All attendees were treated to a complete tour of the new facility. You may have heard or read in the news a recent change with regard to immunization requirements for school-age children, specifically the elimination of religious exemption option. Here at South Country, we have 48 students affected by this change. Not too long ago, I met with some of the families to discuss their concerns, in particular, the timeliness of the change and that families may not have enough time to plan and adjust. I followed up with a letter to our governor expressing this timeliness concern, which I will share with the board in tomorrow's update. And finally, New York State Education Department recently released results of our 2019 grade 3 through 8 ELA and math assessments. I'm happy to report that our students have made marked improvement over performance levels. Third grade students demonstrated a 19% increase overall in ELA and a 15% increase in math. I will provide additional results in tomorrow's update for the board, and we'll do a complete results for our workshop that's scheduled for October 30th. And that is all the items I have to announce.
Okay. Next, we have trustee and advisory committee reports. Any communication? I don't know that there have been any advisory committee meetings since. I'm sorry. Okay, so, but Trustee DeSanto, if there's anything you need to bring up right here, it's a good time to do it.
Just wanted to piggyback off of what Dr. Gianni mentioned. I was thrilled to attend ribbon cutting of the South Haven Early Childhood Center. It's something that I have worked on for many years, being part of the pre-K committee. I'm thrilled that we have several full-day options in the building for students as well as part-day. Very grateful that we also now have the additional aftercare option as well as transportation in the building. So it's a wonderful thing for our students, for our community. And it was actually nice to see us in Newsday for this. It's nice to see us in Newsday for something good. And just one question, if you have, Dr. Gianni, I was wondering on the first day, what was our enrollment?
Oh,
If you
gee,
could
that's
get
a
us that
good one.
number.
I think 154. Let me get you the exact number.
appreciate
You know what I
that.
do have for you, Trustee DeSanto? The usage of the transportation. We had 70% usage of
Great.
those eligible for transportation.
Wonderful to hear. That
We were
definitely
anticipating
makes
that
it.
question, not the total number.
I
I'm sorry.
gotcha. Thank you for the information.
Okay, Ms. Aruda?
Just quickly, I did the building walkthroughs before the beginning of the opening day. I want to thank the custodial staffs, the teachers and the staff for really setting the buildings up beautifully and welcoming our students. And I just want to welcome everyone back for the 19-20 2020 school year. I think it will be our best yet.
Mr. Patino?
Not much other than piggyback off some of the other comments. It was, I know personally for my family, it was a successful opening of school. And right back into it, it was great on the first day of school. I know the girls volleyball team and the soccer teams were in action with games that day. So I got the opportunity to go up to high school and watch a volleyball game, a little bit of the soccer, and it's, it's right to it. First day of school, we're in games already. So it's great, and the way everything just kind of blended in. I'm very blessed to have two children at Frank B. Long this year, which has always been my favorite building, and they just could not have been happier with their start. So looking forward to a great school year.
Thank you. Mr. Nix?
I, along with Trustee DeSanto, Trustee Trent, and President Hayes, attended the ribbon cutting for the South Haven Early Childhood Center. It was a really exciting and beautiful event to see this great idea come to fruition. And I wish that building success, and I hope that we have a great school year ahead. I'm also talking to Principal Clark over at Kramer to set up a day in October to go read to some classrooms. I'm gonna take the morning off and go say hi to the Kramer Kingdom. So I'll report on that afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Parker?
I want to thank Dr. Gianni for the walkthrough we had recently at all of the schools in our district. I was very impressed with all the schools, and I thank the people who worked tirelessly, I'm sure, to get the schools ready for the school opening. It paid off. It was just wonderful. And I was particularly impressed with Frank P. Long. I think that school is nice, and that yard they have there, boy. If you've never seen it, go take a look at it. They even have Peachtree there.
Mr. Trent?
I just want to piggyback off of what everybody said. The walkthrough, the buildings were amazing. Thank you to the custodial staff and the ribbon cutting ceremony at the Early Childhood Education Center. That was a great event. And, especially like Mr. Parker mentioned, the courtyard of Frank Plum is amazing. And the peaches taste great. Me and had one. But yeah, special thanks to you guys. Thank you.
We have our student representative, and if you could give me your whole name, I know.
Carly Dialosa.
Carly, okay, thank you.
I first just wanted to say that I'm grateful to be back for another year. This is a really awesome opportunity that not many students get to have, so I'm grateful for that. I just wanted to point out a few important dates that Student Council will be hosting. This Friday, we have our ice cream social after school, where we serve ice cream to students to welcome everyone back for the school year and so that people have an opportunity to socialize and make some friends. Next Wednesday, the 18th, in the courtyards after school is Club Day, where students get to walk around and see all the clubs that the high school has to offer. And it's set up with snacks and treats, and it's a great way to see what we have to offer at the high school. And on October 5th, which is homecoming, we're really excited. All the grades began float building for the children's book theme, and I can say that everyone in the high school is looking forward to that. And I also just wanted to mention that Stuco is really looking to work with administration to keep open communication regarding the climate of the building. We have a few ideas that we think will bring positivity, and we're going to look to share them soon. We're just in the works of them. So that's all I have for now.
That's good to hear, and I would say once you've structured or outlined what it is you want to bring to the board, if you can just make sure it goes through Dr. Gianni's office so we can put it on the agenda and get it on a board meeting. And I'm hoping you're going to do that sooner rather than later.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you. I would only be repeating things that have already been said, and I have vowed not to do that. So we will move forward to public commentary, and this is for issues that are on the agenda. If your comments have anything to do with non-agenda items, there'll be time after we've done other parts of the meeting. This section gives the public the opportunity to comment on the agenda items that they wish to speak about. Each person will have a 3-minute period to address the board. And there'll be a total time set aside of 30 minutes for all comments. If you want to make a comment, you need to submit a yellow card, and these are the only ones right now for the agenda items? Okay. I just wanted to add something because it's early days for us as a new board, and with 4 new board members, you've not seen us up here really to run a board meeting. This is the first evening where we've had people who've given their time and interest to come and observe the meeting. But as a board meeting, we're meeting with each other, and we're doing it with people looking at us and listening to us, but it's not a meeting per se with the public. And it's a little awkward being, sitting up here for the first time, trying to focus on the faces of board members as opposed to looking out into the audience when we make comments. But we're gonna be working on it, and I think within the next few months, we'll do a better job with that. Okay, we have 4 speakers. Barbara Schatzman.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all the new board members, the elected members. Some of you might not know, I was a board member for 9 years. I know the job that it entails and all the hard work. And as long as you keep in mind why you were here, and it's for the kids, that'll be free. And if you can go to any of the New York State School Board Association meetings for new board members, they're extremely helpful. And one of the things you will learn there is that you do not have to answer to administration. Administration has to answer to you. So if you find something that you are very interested in or disagree on somebody or something, don't be afraid to say anything, because you're all here for the kids, and that's what's the most important thing. Now, the letter, I'm going to be referring to a letter that had to do with opt-out, and that's why I figured it was an agenda item. But it was a letter that was written in May. It was given, in June of 2019. But I hadn't had the opportunity to discuss it. It was a letter from Dr. Colson. And Dr. Colson, this is no reflection on you. I'm just referring to what was in the letter, and I'm sure that it didn't just come from you. And in the letter, it went to parents of the children who took the New York State assessment. And I wrote down some stuff that was in the letter because I don't want to misquote. And it said, as the school year comes to a close, I want to thank you for the tremendous support you have provided to our students. I especially want to thank you for having your child participate in the recent New York State assessments. As you might know, our school is identified as a comprehensive support and improvement school. We take pride in knowing this designation does not accurately reflect who we are as a school, which I greatly appreciated that being in the letter. I would like to acknowledge you for taking the time to have conversations with our students about the importance of these assessments. Good letter. My problem with this, and I got very upset when I first saw it, is what about the parents who supported their children, their students, by refusing the test? They felt they were supporting their students in that way. Nothing went home to those parents. Maybe because they feel the tests themselves become the focus of education and they had the child refuse the test. Maybe because exams are loaded with poorly written and ambiguous questions. It became quite obvious to me when a poet whose poem was on the ELA test this past year could not answer the questions on the test about the poem that she wrote. There's a problem. Is my time up?
Yes. 3 minutes goes really fast.
God, I come from Brooklyn, I thought I could talk fast. Okay, okay, thank you.
Do you need 10 seconds to finish your
10
thought?
seconds, are you serious? And you know me. I just want to say that I think that And again, I am not blaming Dr. Colson. I understand that he has directives that he has to follow, but I just thought the letter was divisive. And that you have to show support for all the parents and whatever they decide, and that the state test should not be the focus of how we recognize our parents and the students who receive certificates in the classrooms in front of other students who do not get them. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next is Kelly Schussler?
I'm here tonight to express how upset I am at how the NWEA test refusals were handled this year. As a parent, I know I have the right to refuse non-mandatory testing for my child. I feel that the administration was attempting to confuse parents who do not know their rights with a letter that was worded as if refusals were no longer being accepted by the school. This letter should have been sent out before it was. There was a huge packet of school information and forms which the letter should have been included in. Instead, I received a phone call from an administrator trying to sell me on why my child should take the NWEA. I know my reasons for refusing, and it did not change my mind. We did not receive a copy of the letter until the second day of school, attached to an email about bus drills and school photos. I also hope the district is not going to try to make my child state that she refuses to take the test. This is a bullying tactic that other districts use, along with the same opt-out is no longer allowed letters. If a parent is refused on behalf of their child, that should be good enough. Most of our children have been raised to respect their teachers, and it would be very uncomfortable to the point of extreme anxiety for them to tell a teacher, I refuse. It is counterproductive and will make students who love school feel differently. In the 10 years I've been a parent in this district, I've always defended how great our staff and teachers are when people say negative things about South Country. I hope going forward I will still be able to say that about our district, that our district respects parents and students, because I certainly did not feel this way this week. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Bill Schussler.
What she said. It pretty much is. I had a long conversation with some administration on the phone about this issue, and the impression I got personally was it was a sales pitch. It was something that he had in front of him as a piece of paper. He read it word for word. I didn't get a chance to ask questions. Any of my questions were kind of just pushed to the side, and he just regurgitated this information again. That's not communication to me. That communication is a two-way street. I should be able to ask questions. He should have knowledge on the questions that I'm asking. It's all about this testing. And he should be well versed in it. And that wasn't the case. We feel that our child is being put in a position that she shouldn't be. It's really it's big on communication.
Thank you for your comments. Monique Arman.
Hello. I'm Monique Garman, and I'm here to talk about the tests. In the letter sent out from Dr. Colson to middle school parents, it stated that the NWEA testing, and I quote, is no longer an opt-out situation, unquote. We've never had the option to opt out in this district. Parents simply refused the tests. The state of New York has no law, nor does any state in the U.S., against parents or children to refuse these state tests in K-8. We could debate for hours the controversial issues that surround New York State Board of Regents' decisions over the years, their constant changes and requirements, and how far those tentacles reach. But I am simply here tonight to state that the tone of the letter, the clever use of semantics in the letter, and the curiousness of it being dated August 2019, but not delivered to anyone until right before the testing in September, does not give the impression of a school or district that respects the intelligence of its parents or respect the parents' right to advocate for their children. It in fact does the opposite. And why this year? And why this test? In the past, our district has always been respectful of parents' decisions in this regard. In fact, even providing alternate learning opportunities for those not taking the test. Why the strong arm tactics now? And how can you say you're concerned for student welfare in a time where student anxiety and test anxiety are at an all-time high, and yet you would put a child in the middle to make them decide whether to go against the wishes of their parents or the wishes of their teacher if the teacher puts the test in front of them? That is cruel. Whose purpose does it serve? Certainly not the child's. I always thought our school district was a partnership between parents, caregivers, community members, administrators, teachers, and Board of Ed members. It's a shame that at the very start of our new school year, this is the tone the district is setting. We have the right to refuse these tests with no punitive action to the children. To state otherwise is misinformation and a lie. And why are we starting the school year off with lies? Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that's it for agenda item comments. Next, we have items for discussion and action.
Yes, thank you. Our first item for discussion will be the board's priorities for the 2019-20 school year. Based on our discussion at our last board meeting, I have updated our first draft version for the board's review. At the board's request, I've added the district mission statement and strategic planning goals above board priorities, and I've made the additions as suggested at our last meeting. These changes are redlined and also appear in final version for the board's review, and I offer it for the board's discussion and hopefully action.
Okay. Do we have any board member have questions or comments?
Just
And
as-
two hands at once.
Jack can go first.
So Jack first.
Just a statement, I think it looks really great with the mission statement right on top. So when community members, parents, teachers, anyone want to look at our priorities, they can compare them to the mission statement and our strategic planning goals. It's very clean. And how you related it to each of the tenants and all of the committees. I think this is the clearest priorities that I've seen in this is my third year looking at them. So thank you to administration for that.
Mr. Trent?
I agree with Jack completely. I thought that we had approved another committee though. I thought it was the political committee we approved.
Legislative.
Legislative,
yeah.
Is that wasn't mentioned on the board advisory committees?
Oh, because it's not it's advisory, but it wasn't one of the 4 advisories. I mean, we could certainly tag that on there with no problem.
Is that going to be a standalone committee or is it a
I think-
subset
I
of
think that's going to be a standalone.
Okay.
We initially thought it would be a subset, but I believe the board had indicated at one of our previous meetings that it should be a standalone.
So we need to get that set up and in
Yeah.
place. Okay, good.
And I agree with the mission and statement, the strategic planning goals. I think that was a great suggestion. It does kind of let it all flow. I want to bring to the board's attention the last time mission statement and strategic planning goals was revisited was 2013. So those are not things that you do update every year, but if the board wishes to revisit them, it may be a good time to do that now that we're including it on the whole document. However, I would not want that to hold up your priorities.
Any other comments before I make my own?
When would we start working on the new strategic planning? Because this one ends in 2022.
Probably 2 to 3 years. We just updated that last year. So we would do it at the next benchmark, Mr. Trent. Not sure what it is, but I think it's 2 years from now.
I too like the layout. I think it's a big improvement because it allows us to focus on why we're here and to make sure that everything we're doing is consistent with our mission statement and our goals. I understand the need to go ahead and approve tonight the priority section in particular, because that's something that needs to be in place so that from top down all the way through all of our teaching staff and administrators. They'll know exactly what the priorities are, so everything can be performed within that context. The mission statement and the goals, some of that language I think we could actually make better. And I would propose that tonight we approve this, but with the understanding that as a board, we can talk a little bit more about the mission statement and the goals, and then bring that back, and then at a later meeting, if there's a sense that we have done an improvement on those, we'll just add it, modify the goals and priorities that we're doing tonight. Would that be okay with everybody?
Completely.
Sure.
Okay. So, you want to offer that you've already offered this, or another comment?
Yes. Happy that we've streamlined these and also categorized them. For number 5, I'm in need of some punctuation.
Okay. Can you
Can you point?
punctuate it so that we know?
Because it says, develop a fiscally responsible and transparent budget. Need something there.
Okay.
Maximizing efficiency and economy. So I think we need some commas.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, you're right. I think a comma right there would probably take care of it. So with the punctuation change, are we all in agreement that we're approving this document as presented by the administration?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Mr. Trent's made the motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Nix has seconded it. All in favor? We've got unanimous approval. That one has been consented to.
Okay, thank you. The next item for discussion is opting out on local assessments. This item's been added as an item for discussion at the request of one of our trustees. As the board is aware, a recent letter to Bellport Middle School parents indicated students could no longer opt out of taking a local assessment, which is the measure of academic progress by NEWA. For the board's information, some parents send letters to the school requesting to opt out their children out of state assessments. In these form letters, many parents also check off and include any assessment tied to teacher evaluation, including the measure of academic progress. The measure of academic progress is a local assessment, not a state assessment, and there is no refusal or opt-out provision. The measure of academic progress serves as the district's required universal screener to identify students in grades K through 8 who may need additional support services. The middle school's letter was an effort to better inform parents of the importance of taking this assessment. This way children are properly placed, getting the supports they may need, and to improve overall student learning. I offer this for the board's discussion.
Okay, I'm going to start with this side of the table.
Well, clearly, we know that I placed that on the board because it is something that is on the agenda because it's something that's near and dear to my heart. I beam with happiness that our community did come out and speak in behalf of your children in terms of this particular.
Of our children, we represent the
Yes,
district.
Correct. I myself was extremely upset when I received this or heard of this letter coming out. The NEWA is an assessment that is used to evaluate the teachers. It is part of their APPR. Many parents, there really aren't that many here, do choose to refuse it based on those levels, on that measure alone. One assessment should never, ever be what causes a child to receive additional support services. So it is my hope, in what you had just spoke about, that there's a multitude of measures when we are thinking about children receiving AIS, or we talked about RTI, although that really should come from a classroom teacher. But at the end of the day, it is our children, my child, if I choose to refuse to have my child take that test, it's my choice, and I'm doing it not as a South Country thing, but as a New York State thing.
So, just to answer your question, there are multiple measures to place children. This is only the required universal screener that we must give, and we should give, in terms of identifying kids for the first time, and then we look at additional measures before children are placed.
So it is my hope that we will not see letters that, for lack of a better term, have bully tactics, that we don't honor these opt-outs. I was down this road 3 years ago, and there was a miscommunication. My daughter was forced to take the test, and I can tell you that I was not very happy, as I'm sure some of these parents sitting in the audience were not very happy when they received that letter. This is our children, and we are doing what we feel is in the best interest of our children.
And the letters will be honored.
Okay.
As I mentioned earlier, it was an attempt to educate parents on what the purpose of the MAP assessment is.
So maybe we'll
And
reword it if we wanna.
we can always learn from things that are done with best of intentions, that there are ways to improve upon that, even if it just is boiled down to a comma. So we can work on that. Mr. Nix.
I too was perturbed when I heard about the letter. I wasn't aware of it going out. When I heard from some community members how angry they were with the wording of the letter, and I myself was very confused, and I was thankful that Trustee Aruda asked to put this on the agenda so the community can come speak out about it. And thank you to administration for the explanation and saying that the refusal letters that came in will be honored. I completely agree that parents, if they choose to have their child opt out, they should have that right. I do think that the tests, this test, is good for our data within the district, so we know what's going on. But I'm thankful that we're honoring a parent's right to opt their child out in this scenario.
And perhaps President Hayes' administration could present to the board the value of data such as that acquired by MAP during our workshop on student achievement, because that may better educate the board on the use of it and the benefits from it, as well as the public, because it's a work session.
I would be really grateful if you could put together a program like that for us, so that we can understand exactly what the MAP test is intended to do, and the effects that we have seen from it. It's my understanding that it's an attempt to screen individual students, and that over the course of giving the different MAP tests, it's updated to reflect that particular child's progress within the classroom. I would like to have a fuller picture of it, and I think it would be best to have it in a workshop meeting where we're devoting time just to understanding this.
Okay. We'll prepare that. And just to speak to the teacher evaluation piece, I know you're aware it's required. And if we were to decouple the MAP assessment from the teacher evaluation, we would need to add an assessment. So I know you're against also, speak against additional assessments, as am I.
Right.
And we're not looking to add another assessment, just to take care of the teacher evaluation piece.
And am I correct in understanding that when this particular test was implemented some years ago, it was after discussions with administration, and were the teachers involved in discussing that?
Newa was here before I arrived, so I really couldn't speak to that. I know since I have been here, we've done a great deal of professional development around it. But how it initially got here, I could not speak to. I'd have to do some research on that.
So at our workshop meeting, though, you'll
Awesome,
let us
sure.
know where we are today, even though we are
Yes.
not clear exactly on the history. And we'll be able to ask our substantive questions at that point when we know more, but.
If we are having, and we're having a presentation, so adding into that, how we're utilizing the data, and also because we do give several assessments and we see varying data within those assessments, what are we doing to pinpoint? So if are we just using, so when you're assessing using the NEWA and Fontes and Pinnell, and you're getting different data from that, what we're doing, what are we doing with that? So if we could put that into the
Yeah,
workshop.
so it's all, it's like the perfect storm, because we're in the process of rewriting our RTI plan, which will ultimately need to be approved by the board. We'll bring that as well, and this way you will be able to see the supports that are given from that, as well as the other items that place kids at what level of RTI. I think you'll have a full understanding of the use of the data there.
Okay.
Mr. Pacini?
Yeah, I really didn't want to comment on this topic, but I can't help it. I don't want to debate the useful NWAA. I have my own opinions for my own children. I have my own opinions for my wife as an educator. But I do have a problem with this narrative that the district or district administrator initiated a bully tactic. Okay? I have a problem with that. The educators that I know in our district want nothing but what's best for our district and our kids. So whether the communication could have been delivered differently at a different time, if the wording could have been different, that's all open to interpretation for whoever wants to interpret it. But the assumption of malice, which is a term that's been used at this table before, every time somebody tries to follow through on an initiative, whether it's required by law or whether it's a district initiative on what the administration feels is the best way to, measure performance or whatever else it is, that's the part I have a problem with, okay? I don't believe that our middle school principal acted in any type of malicious manner to try to bully anybody into anything. I think he did what he thought was best, and I think, again, it's open to interpretation as to the effectiveness of the timing and the wording in his communication, but I believe our middle school principal deserves a little bit more credit than some people, and I'm not pointing names, it's a narrative in the community among certain people. So I'm not referencing your comment,
And
I'm
I
not
don't think it
referencing the
came-
speakers
I don't
or
think it
anything
came
else
from
like
the
that.
middle school principal, if you want my honest
Whatever
opinion.
it is, but this assumption of malice and this accusation of a bullying tactic, it doesn't sit well with me. And I felt it important to say that. With that, I also have a question is, do we know, well, you know what, I'll reserve that question for another meeting. Never mind, thank you.
Mr. Nix?
I just want to say I completely agree with what you said, Trustee Pacini, and I in no way, by saying that I was perturbed by the letter, want to mean that against Dr. Colson at all. I mean it in the sense that community members that came to me to say that they were upset by the letter, that is what I mean. I have full faith in the administration at the middle school, and I know that they're doing wonders with our children, and I know it'll be a successful year with Dr. Colson, so please.
Mr. Parker?
I think in some ways we dropped the ball on basically how the letter came out.
Right.
But I don't believe for a second that there was any malice, and it's the law. I wish we had done it a little different. It was not, but I agree with Mr. Bettini. I just don't think there was any malice. I think we should.
Thank you. I agree with that as well, and I will say that when I read the letter, I did not interpret it as being bullying, and I did not interpret it as putting the burden on children to make a decision that had already been made by their parents. That was my own reading. I know that there are people who have read it differently. We've heard some people speak tonight. What that says to me is that we've learned that we can, next time, do it better. And if, with extra eyes on the letter, make sure it captures the intention, because I too agree that the intention here was to try to show the distinction between the local assessment and the Common Core assessments. So I'm feeling good about our discussion tonight because we have our superintendent who's going to put together a workshop presentation, and I think we'll all become a little more fluid in our use of language with regard to the assessments, and continue to make sure that we're offering the best education to each and every child that we're capable of doing here. I think we're capable of doing really good things, and I think our middle school administration has the children's best interest at heart. We're gonna all look to be a little clearer and a little better. So for purposes of this discussion, we're not really gonna ask for any action tonight other than to wait to have a further presentation at another meeting.
Yes, that I believe is on the October meeting.
The second meeting in October.
30th.
30th? October 30th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, moving on to our next item for discussion, which is the Suffolk County plan to link school security cameras to the Suffolk County Police Department in cases of emergency. Attached for the board's review is the memorandum of understanding that would give such access to the Suffolk County Police Department. We did begin this discussion at our last meeting when clarification was requested regarding item number 3 on page 2, specifically how our devices are triggered, as well as FERPA issues raised by council at that meeting. Council has some additional information that he has learned in this regard, and I'm going to ask him to share that with the board.
Thank you.
So I do have a conference call scheduled with the county attorney's office. It's my understanding that they're still looking for grant funding for this project for rollout. And we're speaking to the county's attorney office and hopefully somebody in the police department to get the specifics on how this actually works so we can understand the nuts and bolts of the transaction. The MOU talks about different rights, but in my experience, you really have to speak to the computer people to say how it really works and who has authority to flip the switch and what data is being recorded on a continuous basis as opposed to what's live and what's not. So we have initial discussions about those topics, and we'll follow up with the county.
So the intent of the MOA is kind of premature, isn't it?
Well, I think its intent is to try to gather and districts to enroll. But from my perspective, the details are not ironed out enough that I can say that the FERPA concerns have been entirely addressed. But we're working with the county to try to address those.
And will you, I don't need to speak for the board, but I think the board might want a client memo in regard to the following.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. That's a given.
The use of the word premature, I think, it indicates how I'm feeling here. Like, until they've got the things worked out, we don't know whether they're gonna have access to the data that we've recorded until after the fact. That seems to be how the document is written now.
That's true. It indicates that they would have access for maintenance purposes before there's an open live and I went through this in Nassau County, and in Nassau County they were recording and maintaining data before an incident, so they could actually go back and look at an incident. So it did have a number of concerns.
Mr. Pacini?
Do we know, or John, do you know, is this topic been addressed or discussed with the legislature? Because, I mean, I have some grave concerns about this, right? And anybody knows me knows I'm all about safety, whatever we have to do in the sense of an emergency. But there's so many pitfalls here legally and liability in FERPA. It's been my contention for some time that the legislature really needs to address this in some way or another so that we're not responsible for Suffolk County Police Department, you know, looking in through our cameras at what's going on in our buildings. So,
Well, I'm not aware that the legislature has stepped in on this issue, but I appreciate the police department's concern and their
As do I.
objective. And I want to try to work with them to find a way that their objectives can be reached, certainly their school district objectives as well, but also to comply with FERPA.
yeah, I mean, it just seems like it's not very well thought out yet, hence premature. And I guess you have other districts that have similar concerns,
Yes.
so, okay.
I'm wondering if the memorandum of agreement that we've been looking at was drafted by somebody who's not an administrator or educator. And that's part of the problem we're having with getting aspects of it changed to suit our obligations.
Yeah, I think, and I think I said this before, it might have been an executive session topic, I know it was in an issue we have now, but it just seems everywhere you go, you know, these days in education, there is two different sets of rules for two people who have the same objective, which is to keep our kids safe, but, you know, nobody's really gelling here to try to, and I personally believe it has to get done through the legislature because, you know, I mean, just trying to get these memorandums of agreement to cover ourselves in lawsuits and things like that, there needs to be clear-cut laws as to what type of information we can transfer over to law enforcement in case of an emergency. And we've gone through this before, you know, recently in you know, a legal matter that we obviously can't discuss here, but there were some things throughout that process that surprised me and would surprise the public to know that if we wanted to refer to the police department on activity that we think may be, you know, suspicious or criminal, that's a violation of that student's right because anything filmed is a part of their student record. So we can't do that. So even though it may be, you know, a risk at some degree that we would like to make sure we could mitigate, we are bound by laws from doing that. So we as a board of then, you know, charged with, do we violate the law on the part of safety? And if we're wrong and there wasn't an issue and we face a lawsuit, it's a very difficult spot. And I believe the legislature really needs to address this sooner than later. So.
Okay.
I
Mr.
think
Parker?
schools are dealing with this issue nationwide. It's sad that we have to even have this discussion, but because of the many incidents that happen in and out of schools across the country, you know, is it well thought out? Who knows? That's a good question, but at the same time, you can't not do anything. It's important that we do something about it, and sometimes doing a little bit is better than doing nothing. You can talk and talk forever and still not come to a conclusion and still be wrong, all right. But at one point, we have to say, okay, we're gonna do what we can to protect ourselves legally, but at the same time, our obligation is to protect the kids and the teachers in that classroom.
And I think that, Mr. Sheehan, as you pursue this, it's moving us in the right direction. And in fact, what may come out of it is a better work product that then could be used, you know, by other districts if they're considering having an agreement with the local police department as well. So, thank you for
I will pursue it, and I
following
will
up.
advise the board.
So,
Moving on.
yes.
And the final item for discussion is the proposed bylaws and resolutions of the New York State School Boards Association. We'll turn this item over to trustee Puccini, as he is a member of the Nassau-Suffolk School Board's Executive Board. I believe you do have some documents.
Yeah, there's some stuff and so my purpose was just to bring this to the board's attention. These will be voted on at the Nassau-Suffolk School Board Association dinner on September 26th. I know we have some representatives of the board going to be there. You'll have a card. I don't think I can make it. I have another obligation. But with this one document, the larger of the two with the 38 pages, these are proposed resolutions submitted by the New York State School Board Association to the state on recommended changes and proposals and resolutions. So there's a lot of information here. You could see this, no, this is, I'm sorry, the wrong document. There's a lot of background and rationale. And what's interesting about this, and this was my first meeting of the legislative committee of the Nassau-Suffolk School Boards. You really get a sense when you read when you open the second document, which was the document that we used, the worksheet, and what the Nassau-Suffolk School Board, what we do in this meeting is we vote whether or not to support or oppose the recommendations of NYSBA, and then that's what the vote is, and then all the districts vote on it. But when you go through the worksheet, you actually see where these proposed resolutions and amendments came from, and you get a sense of what's happening in their districts. And some of it seemed a little silly. Some of it, if you see in the column marked Finance and Legislative Committee, that's how the committee voted. S is to support, O is to oppose, SA is to support as amended. So if there's anything here that the board would like some insight on the conversation during the meeting, I provide this as, just an FYI. But if anybody has some questions on the discussion of the topic that took place at the meeting, please feel free to ask me now or shoot me an email, however you want to do it. But as you can see, the committee went along with most of the recommendations and oppositions to the legislation, to the resolutions and proposals.
Does this require our board, through you, to give?
No, you're gonna, the representatives from this board that are going to the dinner, if they're going to the dinner, and I believe there's a few going, that's where the voting takes place. So you'll be giving a voting card, and they will call out a vote, all those in favor, you'll hold up the card, opposed, and that's it. So, just, FYI, usually there's not much, usually everything gets approved outside, once it goes to committee. Usually that's just a formality. But, it is interesting because some of the talking points that I wanted to discuss did come out of this when you look at, and there was a representative from the Rockville Center School District there, which is when we talked about the ransomware issue that was recently in Newsday. There's some resolutions and language here brought forth by them. And there's also an opportunity through our area delegate of NYSBA to bring forth anything we'd like addressed in the future. Obviously not now, it's late, but for next year, if we have an issue, just like I brought up in regards to some sort of legislation in regards to FERPA in the police department, et cetera, we could certainly bring that to that committee and see if we can get some support there to have that discussion, so.
Do you know if the association requires us to appoint a delegate to vote?
You know what, I meant to find that out today and I didn't. I don't believe so. I believe, out of whoever's going from the district's gonna be there, can decide amongst yourselves who, it's one vote per district. So, if there's 3 or 4 people going, whoever feels like raising their hand, I'm at it. Yeah, whatever, whoever's going, I mean, I may go, so if there's 3 now, it may be 4, it may be 3. So, you can vote however you like. If you want to discuss this again beforehand, after you had a chance to read it, and somebody has some, extreme opposition to the way the committee goes, then we should have a discussion on it. Going through it and sitting there, I don't know that there's a whole lot here that's so controversial, but that's up to everybody else.
Do you recall the date of this meeting?
September 26th.
So
It's the dinner.
9/20.
You already
I
signed
know,
up.
Yeah,
but
you're going.
this is what this is what I'm
September
trying
20
to
is it
get
October
at.
26th?
Do we have another
on top of the
board meeting
Then I can't go, I thought it was
before
September
then?
26th. I'm
The
sorry.
25th?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
so
wrong, it's October 26th, I said September.
October
Oh, it's October.
26th. Okay.
That's why it
So-
wasn't, it's a different dinner, was refit was what we
Right,
voted on tonight.
refits at the
Different-
end of this
different.
month, and then, so that dinner, where there'll be a vote cast on these various resolutions, we can have a further discussion at another school board meeting about how we want to cast the one vote that we will have.
Correct. My recommendation would be for everybody to go through this. If anybody has opposition to the way the committee recommends, then, you can certainly reach out to me through an email copying everybody else and ask me any background you want, or put it on a future agenda, however you want to do it. Again, I don't know that there's so much here. The only thing, so a couple of the hot topics, right, that I think will affect us, right? You see, under the recommended for adoption by NYSBA Board of Directors was the issue of, allowing school districts to determine whether or not their buildings can be used as polling places. This has been an issue, right? And we've talked about it, I know we've talked to the Board of Elections. There's a couple of school board members in the meeting that are on the committee that have had success and failure dealing with their Board of Elections in doing that. And I know that's something we'd like to move it to one central location. It's tough to get past because when you go upstate, some of those rural places that just, you're limiting access to voting is the narrative there. Especially now that there's discussion on certain elections having longer voting time, right? They're talking about extending it a week and things like that. So these are things that are gonna have to be addressed. So, the concern that the committee had and why it was amended, I'll get a copy of the wording of what was to be amended, because they supported you see SA/S, support as amended. If our amendment isn't taken up, they still support the measure. So that's why you see that there. I think some of the language had to do with who actually determines whether or not, it's an appropriate polling place based on school usage. So, it says, proposal of Board of Education to determine if their buildings will be used. We really can't determine that, because we could be accused of limiting voting rights if it's inaccessible to certain people, the proposed bill. So those were what some of the amendments were. One that was opposed rather vehemently, which was a topic in the news recently, was there is an initiative, I believe, by the legislature to have local public school superintendents or districts provide oversight into the quality of education in non-public schools. The committee felt that we should oppose that simply. That's SED's job. That's not really our job, even though they're technically our kids from our community, but they're just looking to shift the burden. And, the comment came out, that's just another unfunded mandate. Is asking our staff to go assess private schools and whatnot when, that's their job. The other one was, another issue that's been in the media was discussion about giving school boards, NYSBA supports allowing authorization for municipalities to install speed zone cameras in school zones. The executive committee felt like that's not our purview, that's kind of outside our lane. Municipalities want to take up legislation or whatever on speed zone cameras, et cetera. That's their job, that's not ours. So that's why that was opposed. And I don't know that there were any other opposed or supported. Trying to think. You can see too, when you see listed different districts, you can almost tell some of the issues they're going through. So anyway, sorry, just to prevent my rambling, if anybody has questions on it they went through and they want some insight, feel free to ask now or later or whatever.
Okay, so we all have copies of the materials. We'll review them, come back at our next meeting.
So
And
you'd
I
like to
think-
put that on the agenda?
I think go ahead and
Or
put
we
it on
see if
the
there's an
agenda.
objection first, right? Just if somebody has then put it on.
I mean, right, because if there are more questions or we feel you need to get more information for us,
Sure.
we'll still have time. So let's add it to the agenda
Okay.
for next time,
Okay.
okay? right. All right. Next is the.
Okay, moving on to curriculum and instruction.
Yes.
Okay, administration recommends approval of curriculum items reflected in schedules G1 and G2.
All right.
Motion.
Could I have would anybody make the motion to approve G1 and G2? Mr. Nix? Ms. Aruda, second. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor of approving G1 and G2? We have unanimous approval there, so approval's granted.
And moving to personnel, administration recommends approval of personnel changes reflected in schedules H1 through H8.
Is there a motion by anyone to approve H1 through H8? Ms. Aruda, second, Mr. Nix. Any discussion? Seeing none? Okay, all in favor? Again, that's unanimous approval, so that one is consented to as well.
Okay, and I would like to announce an approval that you did just now, and welcome to the South Country family, a new music teacher, Joseph Giamona. Joseph, welcome. And moving to business items, administration recommends approval of business items reflected in schedule I1 through I7.
I am gonna have a question about one of these, so can I pull that out of your group request?
You could do whichever,
Okay.
or you, if it,
All right, I'm gonna, if we could have,
let me,
we'll
amend
pull
it.
out
You want one?
I1 out. Would you like to recast your
Yes,
request?
administration recommends approval of business items reflected in I2 through I7.
Okay, Mr. Nix made the motion. Ms. DeSanto has seconded it. All in favor? Yes, again, it's all in favor, and those items are consented to.
And administration recommends approval of a business item reflected in schedule I1.
Okay.
Get a motion for this.
All right, Mr. Nix is making the motion, and then a second. Mr. Trent, any discussion on this? Yes, I did. The corrective action plan that you have attached for our review here,
Yes.
I know this is gonna sound like a silly question, but you're confident that that takes care of all the issues that we've been discussing, both in public and then other issues that have come up in executive session with
That along with the proper training and monitoring, yes.
Okay. All right. See how easy it was to back that one out, and now you can ask for approval of I1. And we already have the motion, and it was seconded. All in favor? Again, it's consent by all trustees. I know we go into public commentary, but I'm going to insert myself before then and just point out that we've had some really generous donations from various sources recently. Pardon? Oh, that's in your closing remarks? Well, I'm not gonna step on your toes.
And she has it typed up.
I will.
All right. Mr. Nix has said he's gonna take care of that so that we can go directly to public commentary, non-agenda items. We have one card. Monique Arman.
It was an agenda item, but one of my suggestions has always been, it's really hard to be so much more helpful to parents or anyone that makes comments on agenda items if we could do them after we've heard your discussion on the agenda items. Because then sometimes we're making comments where you might have already answered that, so we wouldn't have to come up and ask the question, or we would like to expand on a comment that was made and we don't have that opportunity unless we wait till the very end of the meeting again. So I still, after all these years, still hope somebody might consider doing commentary on agenda items after the commentary from the board on the agenda items. But I just wanted to follow up on a couple of things that was discussed in your discussion about the test refusal. Is that I heard a few of you say that you didn't feel that that letter, the way it was written, was in any way strong-arming, or whatever term you want to use, that 4 of us came up here and talked about, and I'm sure you had emails saying otherwise also. So the fact is that there was a line in that letter that said parents it's not an opt-out option. That line in itself is not true. And that is the line that is strong-arming. Because you're stating a situation that is not true, when parents know that they can. So I don't agree that we came up here to tell you our feelings about how the letter was presented, and that you're telling us you thought it was not presented that way. It clearly had a line in it that was inaccurate. I also know that Dr. Gianni has stated in several Board of Ed meetings I've been in, this recently is July, 95% opt-in participation rate. He's shooting for that. He said it verbally many times. I understand Bellport Middle School is in a situation where we're being targeted by New York State. And what Ms. Agruda said, that's one of the reasons why we're opting out. Not just about our district, it's about the New York State regulations, which we don't agree with, and have it for 10 years. And it's a very complicated issue, like I said. And if you're putting a workshop together that Gianni is going to present to talk about how these tests are used, I would have to say there's going to have to be some bias there, because he's answering to the state as well as the community, and that is the conflict of interest. And also, it's not a targeted group that is against these tests, Mr. Piccini. There's a lot of parents, and whether it's a targeted group or not, we are all the same group. We're all the same community in the whole district.
Hold on.
You stated, and we can go back, that it was a targeted group that
It's
were...
a point of order, excuse me. Point of
Hold
order. All questions and everything speaks to the chair.
Okay.
Members
Again,
of the public should
we're
not
novice
address
board
individual
members, so
board
we're
members.
not jumping in as early as I should have. That was my job to straighten out, and I appreciate the help from Mr. Sheehan. Any comments you're making
So just
are
2 more.
to me, right?
Middle school, it's 9 days total of instruction throughout the year. 9 days that those kids are losing other instruction time just for these tests. And NWA is not required by the state. Each district gets to decide what type of assessment they use. It does not have to be the specific one. Well, you were talking, but he took a little bit of it.
Did you add time back in for her?
I just have
You
one
did
other-
add it in?
No,
I
You-
just have
okay.
one more comment.
Then we're gonna give you 10 seconds
Okay.
like we did to Mrs. Schatzman, and I think that this exchange took
Yes.
more than that, so you can have
I just
30
wanted to know if
seconds
this
to
letter went out to
conclude.
the schools from K through to the lower grades. Did a letter like this go out to those schools too that also do the NWA, or was it just the middle school? And why would that be? Thank you.
Thank you. And normally at a board meeting, we don't have commentary back, but I just want to leave everybody with this fact. The board members are sworn to follow the law as set forth in the state of New York. And I'm not referencing the NWEA here, but just the law in general that is then handed down to us by the State Commissioner of Education. So we can't step outside a clear directive of the State Commissioner. With regard to some of the comments that were made, I think that a lot of those are going to be addressed in the workshop, and I look forward to hearing them. I look forward to having discussion, because I think everybody at this table recognizes we can always do a better job. what I would like to do is have you put together the workshop like we agreed. We'll come back, we'll have it on an agenda, and we'll have further discussion. And I hope that will answer some of the points that have been made by the public that has spoken tonight, and the questions that the rest of us may have about these procedures. Okay, all right, I think we're on closing remarks, and I'm going to start with Mr. Nix, because he promised to take care of what I thought was part of the agenda.
No problem. We have a multitude of donations to accept tonight. Thank you to Donors Choose and those individuals making donations in support of several classroom projects at Franklin Long Intermediate School. And another thank you to Donors Choose and those individuals to support classroom projects in Miss Mason's class at Brookhaven Elementary School. Thank you to the United Way for their donation of 50 boxes of school supplies for families in need, which is a good promise. And thank you to Angels of Long Island for their donation of approximately 20 boxes of school supplies, also for families in need. And I just want to say thank you to all of them. And one other thing, just for my closing, I think I bring this up every year. October 11th is National Coming Out Day. I would love if maybe we could talk to Mr. Hogan and the Gay Straight Alliance Club in the high school to see if we can maybe put on some sort of program that. I'm not sure if we'll have a meeting. Oh, we will have a meeting before then, but I just wanted to bring that up. Maybe we can reach out to them.
What was the date you said?
October 11th.
October 11th, okay.
And that's all I have.
Okay. So, working this way, any closing remarks, Mr. Parker?
Yeah, 9/11, I didn't speak before. I was profoundly affected by 9/11. I've experienced racism, I've experienced emergency surgery, but nothing affected me so profoundly as 9/11. I stood on my balcony at 61st Street, and I saw the first building fall. I saw the plane coming for the second building as it ducked around the building. You see this explosion, and I saw that building fall. It was one of the worst days in my life, and I'll never forget it. 2 days later, I went to the Red Cross to volunteer, to do whatever I could to help the people. There were so many people standing in line to volunteer. I was just, wow. 2 weeks later, I flew to California, and the outpouring of love for people in New York. He asked me, and said, where are you from? I said, New York. I got hugs, people were hugging me. It was just the love that those people showed during that time. And how, I think, people in general, how we came together. And I love that we could sort of find that feeling again now in a toxic world that we live in right now, and just get back to maybe just loving each other or whatever. But it was, I'll never forget it as long as I live.
Thank you. Mr. Trent.
Thank you for that story, Mr. Parker. I just have a couple of things I wanted to mention. Next month, I believe I'm going to be attending a couple committee meetings. Dr. Johnny, is it possible that we can do anything to get more attendance in that meeting? More attendance of members of the public, whether they be parents or non-parents?
Well, the advisory committees are open to the public. The meetings are posted on the website. You have a suggestion in terms of
Can we
doing
maybe put it on Facebook or advertise it?
Oh, sure.
Other ways?
Yeah, we could
I
do
would just like
that.
to see more, different faces besides the ones I see around the table. Also, is it possible that we could get discipline reports from Frank P. Long, similar to the way we do the high school and the middle school?
Let me look at that. We could certainly give you some form.
Yeah.
Let me look at that.
Also, and I just have a concern. A comment was mentioned earlier about students who don't take the local assessment. I just wish that they aren't, treated any differently from those who do take the assessment. I'm not sure exactly what happens now, but I just don't want them to be, not have the same opportunities as those who do take the test. And that's all I have.
Ms. DeSanto?
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Ruda?
Just happy to hear that we are still going to be honoring a parent's right to refuse. I'm happy to hear that we're honoring a parent's right to refuse still. And piggyback off of Mr. Parker's story, a little bit more September 12th in our world and in our community is, I think, important.
I have nothing.
Nothing. And Carly? No. Yeah, after Mr. Parker, I am at a loss for words, and we'll just carry that. And I would only say that the little bit that we're able to do on a local level of having positive impact upon kids and students and their families and all the taxpayers and residents, we'll just forge ahead, and we're going to be making our best efforts every time. So thank you all for being on this journey with me, and we'll keep going. Thanks to you too, Dr. Gianni, for helping educate us a little bit, particularly at this upcoming workshop. Okay. Does anybody, no?
I have one more question.
One question?
Johnny, tomorrow in the board update, will you be mentioning equity and field trips at all?
No.
No.
So anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I-
One more question?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, the motion by Mr. Parker, Mr. Nix is second. Any, all in favor? Yes, all in favor. We're adjourned. Thank you.